what's more fun than history? That's right, collaging about history. Absolutely. So, with that absolutely thrilling intro out of the way, let me clue you in on what we're going to be working on today. See, a few months ago, I was looking at my materials and all the stuff that I have. Too much stuff, you might say. And sometimes when I'm feeling a little overwhelmed, I create mental space by categorizing things. I started thinking about my materials in terms of when they were printed. And it got my mind turning. What if I made a collage out of materials from a single time period? Or if I don't want to be that restrictive, what if I primarily use one time period and base my collage around some of the historical or, for lack of a better word, vibes of that era? And how could that inform the artwork that I make? So, if sifting through some historical ephemera, learning more about the history and time when those materials were printed, and then gluing them all down into something that might resemble art sounds like fun to you, then let's get started.
For my first collage, I used materials from the 1930s, the decade of the Great Depression. This cover art is so different from magazine covers today. It truly is art. If you'll notice, the ship looming behind our seated figure has the date 1930 on its front bow. Given that the stock market crashed in October 1929, just a few months prior to this publication, is it any wonder that ship looks so menacing? I think this artwork is foretelling. Gone will be the days of Great Gatsby-esque frivolity. I think that she's holding an empty ring box in her hand, perhaps showing the broken promise of the past decade. Because this cover was so beautiful, I really struggled with cutting it out to begin with. A part of me wanted to frame the thing itself, and I did consider it, but I thought back on a conversation that I had with a woman who was looking at these magazines with me when we were going through them at an estate sale. She was also an artist, and I feel like she shared some wisdom when I expressed that I would feel a little bad cutting them up. She basically said that nothing good comes from these magazines moldering away, forgotten in a closet somewhere. So if you have an idea and you want to make it into art, you should totally go for it. After the stock market crashed, there was a groundswell of support for the government to step in and provide safety nets like Social Security and a much higher tax on the uber wealthy. These political efforts led to sweeping changes in the lives of everyday Americans and helped to usher in a period of prosperity. These reforms didn't erase inequality, but they did dramatically narrow the gap and laid the foundation for the more balanced middle-class prosperity from the 1940s to the 1970s. Okay, now that she's all cut out, I have to find something to do with her. Something that feels worthy of the absolute artistry of the original. That's kind of a daunting question, isn't it? Because I'm feeling a bit anxious, I spend maybe a little more time than usual trying to clean up edges and whatnot as I let myself think. One of the things I'm considering at this moment is how out of my depth I'm feeling. I had wanted to collage a decade, but after researching this period, it seems impossible to do an entire decade justice in one collage. Our society is complex and it's flawed. In the 1930s, Jim Crow laws were still enforced in the US and would remain until the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act about 30 years later. This collage doesn't even begin to touch on some of those topics. The pieces that I found to collage with and the history behind them led me to think about America's fixation on wealth and status. We saw what happened when there was a weak middle class. We saw what happened when wealth inequality had gotten out of hand. The thing that seems crazy to me is that it really feels as if history is repeating itself. But I fear that this time around, we're not going to have the gumption to do anything about it. We all still think that we're just temporary, impoverished millionaires. We all think that if we hustle enough, we will get to the point where we can live like the Kardashians. There's something about this constant churn and need for more and more, the belief that the wealthy are somehow more deserving, that just feels so morally bankrupt, as empty as the ring box in her hand. And yet, it's not as if I'm immune. No one is immune. We all are forced to participate in this system. With this collage, I wanted there to be an explosion of light and color. I wanted it to drip with diamonds because the truth is, I don't think that we've learned anything from our past. But it really feels like everywhere you look, there's nothing safe from the constant hustle, the churn. We're just constantly bombarded, surrounded by a grift. It's in the games we play, constant microtransactions and little purchases and jingling bells, and it seems wild to me that a stupid iPad game has the same bells and whistles as a casino slot machine. Everything is about winning and gaining and hoarding. Everything is about trying to make your life just a little bit better with this new product or this new course, or I don't know. Maybe if you just had some Bombas socks, you'd be happy. Not sponsored. But do you see what I mean? Even I could end up being a shill, and it would be because I want to try to survive. Oh, it's so frustrating to hate the system and also have to participate in it. As I'm reaching the end of this collage, I'm realizing I'm not entirely happy with the composition, so I decided not to glue it down yet. But I do like my overall idea, and I think that the words help to bring my thoughts forward. We have a woman wealthy and surrounded by the trappings of luxury. She's totally assured of her superiority, and yet she's holding nothing of true value. The 60s are up next, and this time period in American history is marked by technological advancements in science and incredible social upheaval as our proverbial chickens came home to roost. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 ended legal segregation and, at the federal level, put an end to discrimination based on sex, race, and religion. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 put paid to some of the discriminatory practices historically used to deny Black voters their rights. These were important pieces of legislation, but they weren't the panacea I think many consider them today. Discrimination and de facto segregation remain a part of our culture. But that isn't what my collage is about today, at least not directly. I have a plethora? I don't know, of National Geographics from the 1960s. And one of the repeating themes I saw over and over again was technological optimism. The space race was on, and we were desperate to get to the moon first. I found stories about living on the moon in these giant bases and just a general optimism about the growth of technology at home. Self-driving cars, for example, were a part of the future landscape writers imagined were just around the corner. To be perfectly honest, I've been thinking about this collage for a while. I knew that I wanted to make something about that optimism. And I also wanted to subtly highlight the lack of representation. This image of people watching Apollo take off is a really great example of that optimism. And it also shows the lack of diversity in the crowd. There's a lot of men in there, a lot of white men. And I think that that is a subtle reminder about who the winners in this system were. Then I found this image of an astronaut on the moon, and I really struggled with whether or not I would use this in this collage. Mostly just because I had that weird, tingling feeling like maybe there's a better use for it somewhere, but you just can't always listen to that voice. But I really liked this image of the television and the way that the hand is holding it. I thought that was quite dynamic and fun. It's a bit more active than a television seated without any human interaction. Now that I have all of my pieces, I'm starting to think about the composition, what it will look like, what it will try to draw the eye to, how I will have all of the pieces interacting with one another. There are a lot of different ways that I could have done it, but the one that stood out to me most was the idea of putting the astronaut inside the television, and then having that television popping out from inside the crowd. So to that end, it was time for me to pull out my handy dandy cutting mat. Because this paper was feeling quite fragile, I took my time with it with my X-Acto knife, really trying to not get impatient or drag the blade too heavily along the edge. I did finally end up getting new blades, so it's not so much of a problem, but still, I was trying to take my time and be patient. I did spend a decent amount of time thinking about the orientation of the astronaut, There is no up or down in space, and I liked the idea of maybe spinning it to give it a more alien sort of feel. I ended up having this like sort of tilted orientation, and I thought I would like it if the astronaut was sort of breaking through the screen a little bit, coming over the top of it. So I trimmed around the astronaut, trying to find all the spots where I anticipated he would likely break the frame. And after I had done that, I decided to go ahead and try gluing him into this frame to try to solidify this idea. Problems started to arise for me when I decided to try gluing the TV box down. And it didn't really occur to me until I was starting to cut around this that I had spent all that time trying to delicately cut around all of those little knobs and bits and bobs with my X-Acto knife, and I was going to ruin all of that effort if I tried to cut it with scissors. So what I ended up doing was just, in some places where it was easy, just cutting along the edge, but in the places where it was too difficult, I lifted it up a little bit, and I was lucky in that it didn't tear the paper when I was lifting to get around some of those more intricate spots. Here I am cutting a slit in the paper along the edge of this woman's body because I'm thinking this is where I'll have the arm sort of coming out from inside the crowd. Now I'm sort of playing with placement, and I like my idea of what I'm doing, but I'm realizing that it's going to cover a lot of the people. So I decided that I should probably have some of the people, at least at the bottom, sort of poking out around the TV so that it's, they're not so completely covered. And that means I need my trusty cutting mat out again. So I get that out again and start deciding which people I want to have sort of poking out. And I decide on some of these people who are closest just because I think that will cover less of the screen, but also give that effect of feeling as if the screen is inside the crowd. Because of all of the points where it needed to go behind, but also in front of, and how sticky it was kind of hard to place, but it was worth it in the end, and I just needed to get this brayer out to try and help moosh it down in all the spots where I wasn't quite able to smooth it effectively. The one problem that sometimes have had whenever I have a collage specifically like this, where there's some creative cutting to get the elements to work together, I sometimes will be a little too rough as I'm smoothing and lift up the edges and then cause tears and problems for myself. So the brayer is nice to have, but not necessarily required.
Alrighty, with that, I think that I am finished up with this idea for today, but I don't feel like I'm done with the decades concept yet. I still have loads of materials, and I think it's a really fascinating way to practice my art while also taking a moment to learn and think about topics that I haven't really explored since I was in school. I do really like both collages that I made, though I think perhaps I do want to redo both, but with a different approach next time. So if that sounds like fun to you and you want to hang out with me again in the studio, I hope you'll consider subscribing. And in the meantime, here are 2 videos that you might want to check out. Okay, I think that's it. Bye! See ya! Bye! God, I hope some of that was good.